Samuel Alito smirked. It wasn't just a facial expression, it was a statement, a flicker of arrogance that carried the weight of his robe and the power of his position. The smirk came the instant Senator Rand Paul leaned back in his chair, his words dripping with disdain as he zeroed in on Representative Jasmine Crockett. The hearing room, already charged with tension, seemed to shrink as Paul's voice grew louder, the cadence deliberate, the insult sharpened like a blade. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, his Kentucky drawl dragging each syllable, "if you really think what you just said counts as a legal argument, you might want to go back to law school. Because right now, you're embarrassing yourself in front of the entire country." There it was. The jab. The condescending sting meant to diminish, to reduce Crockett to an amateur fumbling in a profession she had mastered. A ripple of murmurs ran through the room, journalists glancing at one another, pens scratching furiously as cameras zoomed closer to catch her reaction. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't glance down at her papers or shuffle nervously as Rand Paul clearly hoped she would. No, she leaned forward. Her posture was calm, her eyes sharp, her hands clasped together in controlled defiance. The silence she allowed to hang before she spoke was more powerful than any immediate rebuttal. She knew the value of timing, and this was her stage. The history of that room was littered with moments where women, especially women of color, had been spoken over, mocked, dismissed. Crockett knew it well, she had lived it. And yet, each attempt only sharpened her resolve. Rand Paul wasn't the first to underestimate her, and he wouldn't be the last. But he would be the one to regret it the most. "I'm glad you said that, Senator," Crockett began, her tone even, but layered with something electric beneath it. "Truly, because what you just did, what you just said, opens a door you didn't want opened." Rand Paul tilted his head, smirking as though he had baited her into an outburst. He raised a brow, his body language screaming condescension. The audience shifted uneasily, sensing the storm building. The Congresswoman's voice cut through the air like steel. "You told me to go back to law school. Let's be clear, I went to law school. I graduated. I practiced law for years. I defended people who didn't have the money, the privilege, or the influence to defend themselves. I fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. That is my record." She paused, eyes locked on Paul. "And what's yours? Belittling colleagues when you don't like what they have to say." The crowd stirred. Alito's smirk faltered just slightly, but he forced it back, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. He had seen enough of these clashes to know when momentum was shifting. Rand Paul gave a dismissive laugh, waving her off. "Spare us the resume, Congresswoman. You sound like a first-year law student trying to impress her professor." The jab should have landed, but instead it bounced off her armor. Crockett's lips curled into the faintest smile. She had been waiting for him to take it further, to get cocky, and now the trap was set. "See," she said, leaning closer to the microphone, her voice lowering to a deliberate, almost conspiratorial tone, "the difference between you and me is that I don't need to hide behind fancy words or smug interruptions. I don't just say I fight for truth, I prove it. And today, Senator, I came prepared." The room hushed instantly, every ear strained toward her, the tension like a coiled spring ready to snap. Reporters glanced up from their laptops, sensing history in the making. Rand Paul chuckled again, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of discomfort. "Prepared for what? Another speech about how you think you're smarter than the rest of us? By all means, Congresswoman, enlighten us." "Oh, I will," she said softly, her eyes gleaming with a confidence that unnerved him. From her folder, she slowly drew out her phone. Its screen lit up as she unlocked it with practiced ease, scrolling to a particular file. She didn't hit play, yet. Instead, she let the anticipation simmer. "Before I share this," Crockett said, her voice carrying the room effortlessly, "I want everyone here, and everyone watching at home, to understand something. When people like Senator Paul insult women like me, when they dismiss our education, our careers, our intelligence, it's not because we're wrong. It's because we're right, and the truth terrifies them." A nervous laugh slipped from Rand Paul, but it was thinner now, less certain. "What truth are you talking about? You've got nothing." Crockett leaned back in her chair, phone still in hand, her smile widening into something sharper. "Oh, I've got something. Not what I think I have, Senator. What I know I have." The murmurs turned into audible gasps. Journalists' fingers flew across their keyboards. Rand Paul shifted uncomfortably, though he tried to mask it with a scowl. And at the far end of the chamber, Alito's smirk tightened, no longer effortless but brittle, as though he too sensed the ground shifting beneath their feet. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just endured Rand Paul's insult, she had set the stage for his undoing. And with one press of her finger, she was about to change everything. The moment Jasmine Crockett pressed play, the room transformed. Gone was the ordinary hum of political posturing, in its place came the sharp, undeniable resonance of Rand Paul's own voice, echoing through the speakers for the entire country to hear. "We both know the voters don't need to hear the truth about this deal," Paul's recorded voice declared. "Keep it quiet, and by the time anyone figures it out, the money will already be moving. We'll spin it later." The words landed like a bomb. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, as if oxygen had been sucked out of the chamber. For a split second, Rand Paul froze, his eyes widening in recognition. Then, just as quickly, he tried to recover, waving his hand frantically. "This is outrageous," he barked, his voice cracking under the strain. That is completely out of context. It's doctored. It's fake." But Crockett wasn't finished. She raised her hand with surgical precision, cutting through his protest. "Context. You want context, Senator. Let's give the American people more context." And with a deliberate tap, she let the recording roll further. Paul's voice filled the air again, this time colder, more damning. "Don't worry, they'll eat it up. We'll frame it as fiscal responsibility. No one needs to know who really benefits. Just keep your mouth shut, and the donors will handle the rest." A gasp spread through the chamber like a wave. Reporters scrambled to capture every word, their keyboards clattering furiously. Cameras zoomed in on Paul's paling face, his lips pressed tight, his composure unraveling with every second of exposure. "You liar," Paul roared, pounding the desk so hard the microphone squealed. "This is political theater. You're making a mockery of this institution." Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, calm as a surgeon who had just made the first incision. "No, Senator," she replied, her voice clear and cutting. "What makes a mockery of this institution is a sitting member of the Senate caught on tape conspiring to deceive the American people. What makes a mockery is you." The room erupted into chaos. Some lawmakers shouted in disbelief, others called for order. The chair pounded the gavel, but the noise only grew louder. Social media feeds exploded in real time. Hashtags like #RandPaulExposed, #CrockettTape, and #TruthHurts began trending within minutes. Rand Paul's face flushed crimson. He shuffled his notes, muttered angrily to aides, and jabbed his finger toward Crockett. "This is a smear job. You have no right to play this here. This is illegal." Crockett's expression hardened. "Illegal," she repeated, her voice now rising above the din. "What's illegal, Senator, is what's on this tape. And if you think threatening me will scare me into silence, you clearly don't know who you're dealing with." She paused deliberately, locking eyes with him across the chamber. "You told me to go back to law school. Maybe you should have stayed awake in ethics class." The audience roared. Gasps, applause, and laughter spilled into the air all at once. Rand Paul tried to stand, but the room was no longer his. His authority had evaporated, drowned out by the tidal wave of outrage surging through the hearing. Crockett tapped the microphone again, steadying the room. "I came here today not to be insulted, not to be diminished, but to do what I swore an oath to do, defend the truth. And today, the truth has a voice. It's yours, Senator, and it condemns you." Her words were devastating, final. Even Samuel Alito, who had been smirking at the start, now sat rigid, his expression frozen. His trademark air of superiority had cracked, replaced with something bordering on unease. He knew this was bigger than a heated exchange, this was history unfolding live. Meanwhile, Paul's staffers scrambled at the edges of the room, whispering into phones, frantically drafting statements. But it was too late. The damage had been done, the recording already spreading across every media outlet, every feed, every screen in America. Crockett rose from her seat slowly, deliberately, as if to mark the moment. Reporters shouted questions, flashes went off like fireworks, the noise swelling around her. But she didn't rush. She adjusted her blazer, collected her papers, and faced the cameras directly. Her final words were delivered not just to Rand Paul, but to the entire nation: never mistake silence for weakness. Never mistake arrogance for strength. The people deserve the truth, and no amount of smirks, insults, or lies will bury it. She turned and walked out of the chamber, head high, the embodiment of poise and defiance. Rand Paul, on the other hand, collapsed back into his chair, his face ashen, his legacy teetering on the brink of scandal. Outside, the air was electric. Protesters erupted in chants, news vans lined the streets, and every network cut into regular programming to replay the bombshell tape. Commentators called it a political earthquake. Some said it was the end of Rand Paul's career. Others said it was just the beginning of Jasmine Crockett's rise as a new force to be reckoned with in Washington. And somewhere in the shadows, Samuel Alito's smirk had vanished completely. The balance of power had shifted in real time, and America had witnessed every second of it.